And just to make sure, it's pronounced Minno or
Yeah.
Mino? Okay, Minno.
Yeah.
Okay,
Minno.
Minno. Awesome. I'm going to do the intro that I sent to you. I'm going to record it after this and edit it after. But
Cool.
yeah, thanks again for joining me. I'm here with Alex, and he goes by Minno. He is going to talk to us just about his journey in music. He's been doing it for 6+ years. And that's really where I want to start. Just more about you, how you got started in music in the first place, and just if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I started first. Well, I guess my first music experience was in middle school band. I played the clarinet for 2 years. I didn't really like it. It was kind of boring. I was like really good at it in the beginning, and then I didn't practice. So I started out as like first chair. Then by the end, I was like third chair. And then I was like, I'm quitting. I basically quit as soon as I was allowed to. So they
Mm.
put me in this class, music tech, which was just like everybody that quit band. And one of the weeks we actually did music production,
Yeah.
and that's where I sort of like picked it up. I thought it was like the coolest thing. It was maybe like 3 weeks out of the entire year we did music production in that class, and I immediately downloaded my own program, started making beats. So yeah, I've been producing since like eighth grade. I kept with it, kind of very casually through middle school, or well, end of middle school, high school, and then in college a little bit. And then I shifted over to making EDM actually after college and started taking it a lot more seriously, learning about mixing and how to actually make a good song instead of just kind of messing around and doing it for fun. And yeah, I started the current project Minno, and I've been going for a little bit. Was making remixes for a while. Sort of shifted over to making originals now, and yeah, everything's going good. I'm working on an album, and yeah.
Exciting stuff, man. Yeah. So what did you initially produce in middle school? Do you remember what it was?
So the first program I ever downloaded was Super Duper Music Looper. It's not like a legit DAW. It's just like for kids basically. And like you can only loop like sounds that they have in like set in the program,
Yeah.
and you're basically just drawing in loops at random places. So I used that for like maybe a couple of weeks, and then I downloaded the program I still use today. It's called Mixcraft,
Mm,
and I've been using that for a while. Yeah, it they when I started out, Mixcraft is very kind of basic, and they kind of slowly upgraded as I got better at producing. So I never had a
yeah.
reason to change DAWs, and yeah, now it can do everything, and it works pretty great. So I like the workflow, so I haven't changed.
And if you already know it, why would you change to something else if it works for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a program that's more efficient, then I'm all for it. But yeah, I think the workflow is pretty efficient in Mixcraft, so I've kept with it. And I'm
Awesome.
using mostly external plugins anyway, so it's like you can, I don't know, it's just the layout of how things are. Like every DAW can essentially do the same thing when you
Exactly.
factor in external plugins.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Awesome. So you're the first person I've heard that uses that as a DAW. It's very interesting.
I've
Awesome.
like never met anybody else that uses it.
So you've been producing since middle school, so a long time. When did you actually start putting music out there?
uh I mean, I think like maybe even in high school I put stuff on my SoundCloud, but like I was too embarrassed to like even share it with people. Like I just had it on my SoundCloud, and I like nobody knew about it. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't really even count that. So I'd say probably after college is like when I started like, putting it out to the world, and then, actually being like, hey, I made this.
And that's when you launched the artist project, Minno, as well, right? About
Yeah,
the.
so I didn't start Minnow. I started Minnow maybe a year and a half out of college. The
Mhm.
first year and a half, I was just kind of under my real name. and I was just making music, um, putting it out there, and I was kind of just like learning the ropes. Like I wasn't actually like good at making music yet. And then once I thought I got to the point where like my music was getting pretty good, then I changed my name to Minno, and I started kind of focusing on that.
Yeah, man. Now, when you initially launched Minnow, did you have like a set of goals or like a plan or a vision?
Yeah, I mean, just make the best music as possible and get it to as many people as I can.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
it started out like when I was first making music, SoundCloud was huge, and I saw like a lot of artists blowing up on YouTube. So I would always just send my songs to like a bunch of blogs to get it like trending on like SoundCloud, and like there's this website Hype Machine that was big back in the day. I would like try to get it on there, and yeah, now everything is shifted to like Spotify and Apple Music and all that. Different landscape.
Tell me more about that because you know more than anyone probably that getting your music out there and promoting it has changed so much, especially since the SoundCloud era to now. Can you talk more about how it's changed and like how you've what you've done to try and still promote your music even though everything is so different?
Right. So I think it's you know the landscape is very saturated. There's it's like the barrier to entry to make music now is so low. Anybody can download a DAW on their laptop and
Mhm.
essentially make professional sounding music for almost no cost.
Mhm.
So there's so many new artists, and so many really talented artists. It's like very competitive. So yeah, I mean it's tough to compete in that environment. I think it used to be when SoundCloud was like the primary thing, and with YouTube I think it was a lot easier to promote your music without a budget. Meaning like I could get a decent amount of plays on like remixes I made essentially for free, just like reaching out to as many people as I can and being like, hey, check out my song, blah blah blah. And I think now there's so many people out there doing it that it's kind of just like people's DMs get full and they just stop checking it. And I found that to be like less and less effective as I went on, and I eventually just stopped like
Mhm.
cold reaching out to like random like YouTube channels and all that. And now I shifted over to Spotify. Now I have like an ad budget, and I kind of do it more official, and kind of like run it like a business. And I'm trying to run my ads in a way where I'll get paid back whatever I spend on the ads and streaming revenue, and kind of just cycle all that money back into promotion. And yeah, but I mean it comes down to the music. Like the marketing landscape changes, but if you have good music, you'll figure it out, and you can get your music to people.
Awesome, man. Can you talk more about what you were just talking about now, how you use ads on for your music on Spotify? How does that work? And how do you make money back from doing that?
Right. So I didn't know anything about this 2 years ago. This is kind of just something I started recently.
Mhm.
Before I would just use playlists on Spotify. Like there's a bunch of Spotify playlisters that are independent, and I would send my music to them, and they would support it. And then it kind of shifted to everybody was asking for money to get on their playlist, and I didn't really like that, and it felt like less authentic. And so I shifted over to ads, and I found this guy on YouTube, Andrew Southworth. Like if you Google like promoting your music with ads, like he's like the first person that comes up.
Mhm.
I just kind of dug into that. That took like probably a full year to like figure out completely and get the hang of.
Mhm.
And I'm just essentially running ads on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm sending traffic to Spotify.
Mhm.
Uh, or Apple Music too. And yeah, people are sent there, they'll save the song because most of the people being sent there already like it because they click the ad. And then you can, if you get enough streams through the ads, then you can get on algorithmic playlists like Discover Weekly and
Mhm.
radio and things like that on Spotify.
Mhm.
And once you get algorithmic traffic, it kind of just is smooth sailing. It's just repeated plays over and over. And then I guess like that's like in theory where you can, make your money back is when you get algorithmic traction. Because I mean, the ads themselves, you're losing money on. You're not sending nearly enough people to stream the music. So it's kind of like you got to give it a little push, get the song trending, and then it starts to make sense.
So really the investment in the ad is really just to get it started to a point where
Hmm.
the algorithm picks it up. And that's really
Hmm.
what is going to benefit your song is the algorithm.
Yes.
Yes. That's so interesting. I just never thought about that. That's so interesting. And at this point, do you still send your songs to playlists or just is it not worth it anymore now that they're all charging?
I'll do it a little bit. I found that it can almost hurt your chances of getting on algorithmic playlists because Spotify is very big into metrics, and they want to see a high percentage of listeners saving your song. So when you use ads, it's extremely high. It's like maybe 50% of the people listening are going to save it because they all were filtered with your ad. Like they heard the song from the ad, so they like it, and they're sent to the page. So they're probably going to save it. But with playlists, it's very passive, and some people are just at the gym working out, or I don't know, going for a walk, and they're not really even paying attention. So it's less of an engaged like form of listening. So you get really low save rates, and that can hurt your chances of
Mhm.
getting on the algorithm.
So the save rate is super important to
Yeah.
Spotify picking it up.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm learning so much, man.
Yeah, it's like save rate, and then you gotta there's like a minimum threshold of streams you need to get to for them to even like consider it. Because if there's so much music out there, if they made the threshold nothing, then it would be impossible for them to like decide like who I guess which songs to push. So you need to get like, I don't know, maybe like 8,000 streams over the course of like a month
Mhm.
to get on the algorithmic playlist, and that's for Spotify.
Mhm. You, I'm assuming, mainly focus on Spotify. Do you post your music anywhere else? Do you still use SoundCloud?
Yeah. I post my music on SoundCloud, YouTube. I just use a distributor. I use DistroKid.
Yeah.
So they'll put it on. I don't, maybe there's like 20 something different platforms. Most of them I haven't even heard of, but you get on all the big ones. So that's what's important. And then yeah.
Nice, man. Awesome. And you do have one song that recently hit over 1 million streams, right?
Yeah, well, I actually I just had my second song hit 1 million streams.
You
So
have two songs that have over 1 million?
yeah. Uh,
Insane. And tell me more about that. How does that feel and what did it take to get there? And yeah, just tell me.
yeah, I mean, it feels good. It's a sign of progress. Like it's in no way like oh, like I made it. Like yeah, I don't know. Like in the scheme of things, 1 million streams. Like there's artists out there that have like 1 billion streams.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like it's a nice milestone. Like I'm proud of it, and it just motivates me to kind of keep going, and hopefully eventually push it to the point where I can make a career off of music, and that's my main source of income. And yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal. But
Yes, of course. Yes. That's the dream. Awesome, man. And speaking of that, what do you have a specific plan or any specific goals for the middle project, or you just want to keep making music and putting it out there? Or where do you want to see yourself in like 5 years, for example, with this project?
right, I think continue to see like growth online. I'd like to start playing live. I haven't really put much effort into learning to DJ. I've always been, more of a music producer. I know some people start out DJing and then they make songs later. I'm the complete opposite. I've been putting off DJing like as long as possible. But yeah, I think it'd be nice to start playing live, maybe opening for some acts, that like I like whenever they're like in town, or maybe when they come to Austin. That'd be cool, because then I'd also get to meet all the artists that I look up to.
Exactly, yeah.
And put out my album. Hopefully my album resonates with people and is
Yeah.
memorable, and they don't forget about it in like a month or something after I release it. I think that's the goal. Then you just continue to put out good music, you know work on album 2. And I think another part, this is kind of separate from, I guess, my project Minno, is I'd like to eventually start producing for other people a little bit.
Mhm.
Maybe like not, I don't want to do it to where it's like a job where like I'm just producing every random person that like messages me, but more like kind of like a few like passion projects on the side of like different genres. I'm very big into like indie and like indie pop and stuff like that, and maybe do some different things like that, and kind of just experiment there.
Awesome, man. That's a whole side of music that I personally never really even consider, is like the back end. There's so many people that need songs created, and
Yeah.
there's a producer for that, but they don't really maybe even get the credit, or you don't even really see their face. Do you know anything more about that area? Or have you like looked into it any farther?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a whole different world.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still kind of figuring out how to enter it. I think a lot of it is just like, networking. Like you gotta, like, people, and then people, find out that you're trying to produce for other people. And then maybe someone will connect you with the singer, and you get together and see if it works out. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm still figuring it out. But it's yeah, it's a whole different world. Like you're not credited really on I mean, you are in the credits. Like if you look it up online, like you'll be listed in the credits, but you're not like on the song. So it's very much in the background,
Yeah.
which I don't mind. So I think it'd be cool to do that, because it'd be exposure to making different types of music and working with different artists. And it's also cool to be a part of other people's journey as well.
Mhm. Awesome, man. Something I want to talk about with you is you've been producing for so long. Like, for example, just your Minnow, that project has been 6+ years in the making. And I'm sure over time, you've seen a lot of growth, a lot of progress, things that make you excited. But I'm assuming there's also been some times where maybe things are not going the way that you want them to, or maybe you are just a little disappointed with how things are going. How do you continuously find motivation and inspiration to keep going and keep building and keep growing? Because really it's just a constant grind.
Right. I mean, I think it just comes down to how much you want it. Uh, like I guess at the core of like, why do I keep going despite all the highs and lows? Like I love making music, even if I wasn't, uh, trying to grow my artist brand and all that. Like if I was just making it, just for myself and not even putting it out in public, I would still be doing that. So I mean, that's part of it. And then yeah, it's just it's something I enjoy and I'm passionate about, and I'll always keep doing. And you kind of got to just put the low moments aside,
Mhm.
and understand that it's temporary, and if you keep going, eventually you'll bounce back.
Yes.
Like one moment that comes to mind is, this was like probably 5 years ago. So this was when, like, do you know Trap Nation?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the YouTube channel.
Yeah. So this is like when I was first starting out. I sent them a remix I did, and they were supposed to post it. So like
Yeah.
I went from this like euphoric high, and then it gets to the date that he was supposed to post it on, and they post a different song, and I message back, and then they started ghosting me, and I was just like, oh man, that sucks. So
Wow.
like that was like I thought like my life was going to change, like because I was like, oh, I'm gonna
Yes.
be on Trap Nation, but but you keep going, and I found success in other ways. So
Mm. Yeah, man. Like the mixture of like being up here and then down here, that must have been a roller coaster of emotion.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah, but you keep pushing through, and this is where you are today, and you keep going. Like, anything is
yep.
possible. Awesome. I want to know a little bit more about your workflow when you go into making a song. Like, how do you get started? Do you use like a reference or some kind of inspiration, or just walk me through what your typical process is for creating music?
Right. Yeah. So usually at first I'll have some inspiration. I think, generally maybe I'll just be listening to music and I'll be like, oh, I kind of want to make something like this.
Mhm.
Or, I'll hear certain elements from a song and I'll be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I should do something like that. And it always comes out totally different when you try to copy a song. Like you're borrowing like one little piece of it and then building an entire new thing around it. And then, yeah, in terms of workflow, I always start out with chord progression. Like that's,
Mhm.
I'd say 90% of the time, that's like the first thing I do is I get my chord progression down. And that's kind of like the backbone of the song
Mhm.
in a way. And I build off of that. And then I just start building instrumentations, drums. I kind of do uh, sort of after I pick out a lot of the main instruments, and I kind of just slowly build the different sections of the song, and eventually you've completed a track. In terms of like timing, like there's some days where I'll knock out effectively like in a completed song in like 4 or 5 hours, and it's like done in a day.
Yeah.
Like my song Glory, which that was the first song that reached 1 million streams, that I made in probably 2 days, basically. Like it just happened super quick. Like I had like almost a full idea the first day, and then I did some fine tuning the next couple days, and then I think by the end of the week I had put it out.
That is
And
crazy. Yeah.
then yeah, so sometimes your best stuff comes fast.
Yeah.
And then there's some songs that I've waited on, have just sat for like years, and then I come back to it later, and then all of a sudden an idea clicks, and I can build off of it, and then I have a completed song. So there's the work process, the timing varies, and the process changes with each song. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, not every song you make is going to be come to you super quickly and then also be a song that you even want to put out,
yeah.
right? Yeah. What percent of music that you make ends up being something that you actually want to right, release to the world? And it's hard to estimate sometimes.
I think the percentage is increased over time.
Yeah.
I think as you get better at producing, I kind of, well, one, I'm making like better music, and I'm become more consistent with what I'm making. And I also get a feel for what's going to work and what's not kind of right away. So
Mhm.
usually, if I'm working on an idea, I can tell, pretty early on if it's going to amount to anything, abandon it if it's, not the right type of idea.
Mhm.
Um, I think, yeah, in the beginning, when I started, it could have been like less than 10% of the songs I made would go public.
Yeah.
Now it's probably a little higher.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe now it's like 20% or something. But it depends, it could be less than that too. So
Yeah. But really, you still have to make a lot of songs before you get one that you're happy enough with to
yeah,
keep it out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Which is crazy. Which is crazy. Yeah. Awesome, man. I wanted to talk about what kind of plugins or any, you said you use a lot of external plugins. What are you using and what do you use most?
Right. I think the right now I've been using Omnisphere a lot. So
Yeah.
I guess like for you or anybody listening that doesn't know Omnisphere, it's this huge library of samples, and it has I think maybe 10,000 different presets for instruments, and it has a lot of like weird random stuff. And you can also buy add-ons to that. So I've been buying a bunch of add-ons and building on in addition to that, like 10,000. And I use that for pads a lot. For synths, I use Silent probably less than I did in the past. I used to use Nexus a lot. I don't really use it anymore. Spire I'll use on occasion. Serum is probably the synth that's my go-to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's like pretty popular now. Yeah, so I guess that, and then as far as samples, I get a lot of them off of like for drums, I get a lot of it off of Splice.
Yeah.
I've had a like subscription with them for a few years, and my credits keep building up, and I never even come close to using like
It's impossible.
how
How-
many, yeah. uh but yeah, and then for like compression and EQ and stuff, I recently I've been using Fab Filter.
Mm,
That's a pretty good plugin. And yeah, I mean, I think that's like the core of what I use. I mean, you know, I have a list of like probably over 100 like plugins on my computer, but
wow. Yeah.
I don't use them all. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's most important. What do you use most often? That's
yeah.
what most people want to hear about. Awesome, man. So you had two songs recently hit over 1 million streams. Are there any other times in the past where you felt like this is like a big break that you're experiencing?
Uh yeah, I think when I was making remixes and like really diving into that like 5, 6 years ago,
Mhm.
I had a couple like big breaks on like some YouTube channels
Mhm.
where like my remixes got like over 100,000 streams or whatever on YouTube. And at the time that was like a huge like milestone for me. And yeah, so I mean, I'd say that that was like the first like big break where it felt like, you know, my music had, you know, some momentum. And then, yeah, I guess recently on Spotify, uh, that's where all my momentum has come from.
Yeah, man. Feels good, right?
It does.
Yeah. Very nice.
Although you don't want to get complacent, you know.
No, definitely. There's always room to grow. Always,
Yeah.
definitely. Awesome. I wanted to talk about your production in general. You have a lot of music that sounds like very clean and loud too, which I think for beginner producers, two of the hardest things is how to get a mix that is clean, like not muddy, and how to get a mix that sounds loud, that you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
talk about that.
Okay. Um, so I think to get your song to sound loud, I'm a big proponent of the idea that um volume levels are effectively 90% of mixing. Like just having all the instruments balanced in
Mm,
your mix. That in addition to you know, picking sounds that don't clash with each other. I think that that's huge for having it loud. Like you want each instrument to fill out its own kind of position in the frequency spectrum. And you can't think of the frequency spectrum. It's almost like a 2D axis. Like you have the frequency spectrum on the, let's say, the y-axis, and then on the x-axis you have panning, you have left and right. So like if two instruments take up the same exact frequency range, like I don't know, maybe you have a pad and a guitar and they're kind of clashing with each other, and it just sounds like weird. You can just pan one right, pan one left, and all of a sudden it just completely opens everything up, and they have their own space in the mix. And then, you got like kick and bass on the low end, and you get all your hats and stuff on the high end. So it's just, picking sounds that don't clash with each other, or if they do clash, in a way that where they complement each other, and it sounds good. I think that's the big thing. And then I guess specifically if you're looking to make loud music, which in EDM, that's a big thing. In other genres, it's not necessarily. It just a lot of compression. Like the more you compress it, the louder it's going to sound. And yeah, so yeah, I guess just to rehash that. So having a balance of volume levels of the instruments, having all the instruments have their own space in the mix in terms of frequency spectrum and panning, and then, compression, and yeah, you should have a loud mix.
So man, yeah, that's a good place to start. Perfect. You talked a little bit about the need to network in the music industry. Have you done anything like that yet? Have you like reached out to people and started a network, or just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've been so I've always like found people online. There's been like singers in particular. There's websites like Vocalizer and Sound Better. I've found singers on and connected that way. Then I've also found random singers on, like Instagram or SoundCloud, and I'll reach out to them. So I guess I've done a lot of like online networking like that, and run into people that way. In person, I'm kind of just getting into. Before I was living in Connecticut, so that, I mean, it didn't really have a huge scene to network
Yeah.
with people, unless I wanted to like take a train 2.5 hours to New York. But yeah, Austin has a lot more opportunities there, so I'm just starting to kind of network with some local people and figure all that out. But yeah, network is definitely, it's important, because I mean, like even just connections of people I've met online. Like there's plenty of singers I've made a song with. Some have made multiple songs, and I've never met them in person. I've never even had a conversation like we're having here, like over the internet. Like it's literally just like DMs back and forth with ideas, which is kind of weird. Like, but that's how a lot of music is made these days.
Crazy, but it works, obviously.
Yeah, and as slowly as you build up, the people, like a lot of times, like now, if I have a new song just from singers I've worked with in the past, I'll just like immediately know who to hit up. Like I'm like, oh, this person would be perfect, and I'll just see if they like it. And like usually my intuition with that is pretty good. Like if I write a song and I really think it would fit somebody, usually they'll respond positively to it. But yeah, it's networking, it's time intensive, and it doesn't happen overnight. You just got to slowly, meet more and more people.
Definitely. And eventually you get to a point where you have this network and you know who to reach out to.
Yeah.
Who can help you. And yeah, it just takes time and a lot of work. Awesome, man. You do not focus full time on music, right? You have a job, I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, I work a 9 to 5 job. I'm a mechanical engineer during the day,
Yeah.
and then I do music outside of that. So
Yeah. That I think is most people's scenario, where obviously they need to still make money, they have a job, but they also want to put as much time as they can into their passion, music. Can you talk a little bit more about that? For me personally, when I had a job, it was really hard for me to commit time every day after coming home tired from work, and then just really get some time into the studio. And you feel good about it. What do you do personally? What do you find helps?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You gotta, especially like when I was first doing it, I was commuting like an hour to work, and I'd like wake up at like 6:30 a.m. and then get back at 6 p.m. and
Yeah,
I was commuting an hour, and yeah, like I was exhausted, and it's like I don't want to make music. So like
yeah.
in the beginning, I was like I was like extra hungry because it was like right out of college, and I don't know. So like I found the time to kind of like still do music every day. Like
Mm,
despite that, it just like became my life was literally only like work and music,
mm,
like for a while. And then you get better at time management. Right now I work remotely, so
mm.
that helps because I don't have a commute. And yeah, it's I think a lot of people want to just like abandon their job and go for it. And yeah, I totally understand that. And I actually I held that view for a while. I think in like the modern landscape, like so for a song to be successful, it needs to be a really good song, and it also needs marketing behind it. You need both.
Mm,
And for the marketing side to happen, you either need a label to buy into it, which doesn't always happen, or you need to promote it yourself, which costs money.
mm.
So I'm a big fan of having a 9 to 5 job and just dumping like extra money into the music and just seeing what happens, because I think that in itself can be a catalyst. And yeah, but I mean, yeah, sometimes you get burnt out. Like last year actually, I like quit my job
Mm.
without anything planned, and I just took like 5 months off.
Dude, yeah,
And just and because I needed to relax. And I made a good amount of music during that time. And I think for a while I was burnt out, and I could just see like everything kind of declining a little bit with my music, like my motivation and everything. And then that taking that time off rejuvenated me. And now I got an album coming out. And it sometimes time off can be the best solution to a problem, especially if you're burnt out.
definitely, man, definitely. And similar to that, I feel like a lot of people will feel the need to spend all their time doing something productive. Like, for example, if you're a music producer, you want to spend as much time as you can in the studio. But then other people will find that that's not the most efficient way of going about it. Like you need breaks, you need to avoid burnout. And do you find that too? Do you like take time off on the weekends or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not somebody who like produces music every day. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I'll produce one day a week, or sometimes it's one day a month, and then sometimes it's every day for 2 weeks. It's just very random. And to me, I've sort of learned like when like to know myself, and when the creative juices are flowing, and I don't try to force it when it's not there. So
Mhm.
I kind of just pick and choose my times when I feel I could be the most productive and make the best music. And I try to make the most out of that time.
Awesome, man. So you're not like, I need to be in the studio every day. You're like,
No.
when it feels good, let me get in
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I think it's going to be different for every person. Starting out, I think when like you're learning all the little details, that it's probably important to be doing it every day.
Mhm.
And then once you get in a flow of things, like it's probably better if you make music every day. But it's not totally necessary. Like you can still continue to learn a lot of and progress, without spending like 3 or 4 hours a day, or whatever.
Yeah, definitely, man. Um, One thing a lot of at least I've heard a lot of producers talk about, is the need to consistently get music out. And I do believe that is important, but at the same time, it can be hard to consistently produce music that you are feel good about and want to
Yeah.
put out. Like for example, you have this album, but you are putting a lot of time and effort into it, and you're putting off on releasing it until January of
Yeah.
2020. Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because it seems like you're following the approach of quality over quantity rather than the other way around.
Yeah. So, well, I guess a little context before like this album, like I had a few years where like things kind of stagnated and, I was only putting out, like maybe 3 or 4 songs a year.
Mm.
But I mean, I definitely noticed that my growth like flattened during that time. Uh, and this year I changed that. I put out, well, after my song comes out Friday, I'll have, um, 5 songs out this year, and then the album, which is going to be 10 songs. 5 of them are singles that were already released.
Mm.
That'll be out, and yeah. So what was your original question? I lost my train of
Sorry,
thought.
I just wanted to talk to you more about the idea of doing quality over
Right,
quantity
right, right.
with music rather than just getting music out there for the sake of getting music out there.
Yeah. So like with the album, for example, I originally wanted to put this out in like this summer. I,
Mm.
I I thought I thought I was going to have everything done, and
Mm.
then it was my first album. I overestimated the speed at which I could complete it,
Yeah.
and things get pushed back, and then I eventually just decided. I mean, it's effectively done at this point. It's just it's some like all some small changes to the mastering right now, and that but it'll be done in like a week or two. And then I just picked January just because it can be weird just to release it kind of like close to the holidays and that. And so I said, okay, January will give me ample time, and I just picked that. And but yeah, it came down to my album is done when it's done, and I'm not gonna settle with something that I'm unsure of. And it was just sort of getting it to 100% and doing all the small little details to get it there.
Mhm. Yeah, man. And like you said, too, the two biggest parts of the formula for a song doing well is the song being good and the marketing. And you got to
Yep.
make sure it's good before you put it out.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, another thing. So I guess before you were asking me about mixing. So
Yeah.
this album is going to be actually the first album where or even songs really where I'm not the mixing engineer. I hired somebody for it. And like I can mix fine, but my philosophy was there's people with 20 years experience that can do it better than me. And I was thinking of all the money I was investing in marketing, and I was like, well, shouldn't I invest some money in like the actual song itself and make sure that's as high quality as I can. And yeah, so I've been working with the mixing engineer, and I think because of that, my songs are sounding like extra clean and tight. And I know sometimes it's frowned upon in EDM, like people want you to do everything yourself, but I mean, the music industry is built off of collaborations. A lot of the songs you hear on the radio, you could have 10 or 12 people all working on one song. So like, if I hire a mixing engineer to get the song that extra, 3% to get it to 100% to where like I'm totally satisfied, then I'll do it.
Yeah, man.
And I think some advice for like people starting out, I would not recommend getting a mixing engineer when like you're not already pretty good at mixing yourself, because I think it's like it's a valuable skill to learn. And it also, in terms of arranging your song and making good songs, I think like mixing is a part of songwriting, and like you should, like every artist should kind of master that as much as they can.
And again, you said for mixing, the biggest thing the most important thing about mixing is really just the volume of each individual sound, right? And just really using your ear to figure out where that belongs in the mix.
Yeah, so so where I got that was from, there's this like Steve Duda quote where he says that he was talking about his students. He says, I can make a better mix than than most of my students by only using volume automation and
Yeah.
just adjusting the levels of each instrument and using no other plugins, like no compression, no EQ. He's like, I can make a better mix by just doing that. And because he's like a professional, like best of the best.
Yes.
And like it just stresses the importance of balance in a mix.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like where I was drawing that from. You still obviously have to learn all the little tweaks and know how to use compression correctly, know how to use EQ correctly, and special effects and distortion and all that. But yeah, the basics are effectively just having balance and arrangement. I think that's like the core of a mix.
Mhm. Awesome, man. For the mixing engineer that you hired, how did you go about finding them and working with them?
I found it's this guy. His name's Brent. He's on. I found him on the website soundbetter.com. He, I think he's won a few Grammys. He,
But
he seems to have like a pretty successful career.
yeah.
It was not cheap, but I think it's worth the investment. So yeah, I went with it.
Yeah, man. And you can tell too when it sounds just a little bit better, just a
Yeah,
little
for
more
sure.
more crisp. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it builds your credibility too, I think, as a producer, if you're
yeah,
oh,
definitely.
awesome, man. I want to talk a little bit about you mentioned before that you sent your music to YouTube channels and labels to try and get it on there. Do you still do that, or do you mainly release music yourself?
The past 2 years I haven't.
Yeah.
I kind of shifted just to solely self-releasing. I did release with a label 2 years ago. I kind of just found that most small to mid-sized labels don't really add that much value. Like they weren't doing anything that I couldn't do myself, I realized. Uh, so I'd rather just keep 100% of the ownership and spend my own money and try to make it back. And kind of like assume the risk myself to keep the ownership. So that's kind of the direction I've gone. Like if I ever got approached by like a major label, then I would definitely have to consider it, because that'd be, potentially huge. But I kind of steered away from like the focus on, I need to use a label, and I've just been trying to do it myself.
When you do work with the label, though, how does that work? You give away part of the ownership of the song?
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll, depending on the label. So like a major label, from my understanding, they'll take, potentially like 80% of like they basically own the whole song.
Yeah.
And they'll take 80% of the royalties,
Mm.
which I mean, like to some extent, like yes, the label needs to take royalties because they're the ones investing money into marketing, and they need to get that back and potentially make a profit. But a lot of the contracts are like kind of set up in a way to screw over artists. Smaller labels, I've noticed it's different. It's a lot more fair. Like the labels that I've signed with, I think I've only released 2 songs with a label. And both of those were 50-50 contracts. So the label owned 50%, I owned 50%. I got 50% of the royalties and they got 50% of the royalties.
Mhm.
Uh, so, I mean, which isn't a bad idea. Like you're basically trading your like a portion of your ownership in the song for exposure, and then they have their own marketing budget. They're putting money behind it, and you don't have to spend anything. So yeah, it's just a different way of going about it. Now I prefer to own all my songs as much as I can, and yeah, so that's the direction I've gone.
Awesome, man. You also do not use a manager, right? You do everything yourself?
Yep, I've been doing everything myself. I mean, I'm open to working with a manager. I don't really see like too much of so like I guess to have a manager, you need something that needs to be managed. And right now I'm not like touring or anything. I'm not selling merch.
Mhm.
Uh, I think like eventually when I start doing all that, like a manager would probably make sense because there'd be a lot to manage. But yeah, right now it's just marketing, which I've kind of gotten efficient at, and it doesn't take up too much time, and making music. So I don't really see a need at this point in my career, but I think yeah, maybe later on.
Awesome, man. If you could give yourself a few pieces of advice when you were first starting out with the Minno project or just music production in general, do you have anything that you would talk to them, tell them about?
Yeah. Um, well, I think the first thing I would say would be the mixing advice that I gave earlier
Yeah.
about um, sort of the core basics of arrangement and volume levels, and just focusing more on that. I think I felt early on in the trap of trying to I was over mixing, like I was using compression for no reason, and just adding all this stuff that I don't even think did anything half the time. I was just like, oh, I saw this on YouTube in a tutorial, so I'm going to do it here. And it's like, yeah, in mixing, like before you do anything, you need to ask, why am I doing this? Like, what do I want this sound to sound like when it's complete? And is this uh, plugin that I'm using here, whether it's compression EQ, is this helping me achieve that sound that is in my head? If it's not, then don't use it. I think a lot of people overthink stuff, and they try to just use things for the sake of using a plugin or doing something. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes the sound is just perfect. Like sometimes you just have a pad, it sounds perfect, and you don't need to do anything to it. You can just leave that track empty, and you don't need to put a compressor on it. You don't need to put EQ. It's just fine. So sometimes less is more, and you don't need to fix it if it isn't broke.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So yeah, have purpose behind what you're doing. And also if you're going to be using a plugin or even compression, know what it's doing, know why you're using it.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I wanted to ask, is there anything else that I should have asked you in this interview that we should have talked about?
Um, Not that I can think of. I mean, I think you covered a lot. I think we got pretty in depth with the whole process of making music and what it takes being an artist. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
This has been super insightful for me, and I'm for sure a lot of the listeners. And I wanted to give you some time now. We already mentioned your album, but just promote anything that you want to promote right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just my album. So I guess I have a single coming out Friday. I don't know if this podcast will be out in time for that, but yeah, I have a single coming out Friday. It's called In the Night. It's with this artist called Jenny. He's from Africa, and he's super talented. And it's actually sort of like it's a vocal version of a song I already released. The original song is Nighttime, and that was doing pretty well on its own on Spotify. And now this is the vocal version of it. So I'm excited about that. And then I got my album coming out in January. It's 10 songs. It's, I think, my best work yet. I think it has it hopefully tells it hopefully sounds cohesive, and tells a story, and uh, hopefully people enjoy it. I'm excited to put it out.
Awesome, man. Well, it was really great talking to you, Chris. Thanks for taking the time. This
Yeah,
is
thank you.
has been super insightful, and I'll talk to you soon. Have
Yeah,
a nice
sounds good, man. Thanks.
See you.